Welcome once again, all coaches. What I'm going to present today is snippets from a new project that Judo Canada has been working on for the past number of years. It's a project called Judoka for Life. You know it probably as a long-term judoka development model, and it is not a first incarnation of that project. You may know the previous one, which was called Take It to the Mat, that has been produced in 2005 and available to our community since that time. Few technical information, logistic information on what is happening during this webinar. Monsieur Nicolas Brisson, who is co-hosting, who is hosting this webinar for Judo Canada, and I'm a co-host, so I'm making the presentation because it was mostly myself who was involved in this in development of this project, although it has been vetted by practically everybody within the Judo Canada office and number of resource personnel from outside of our community. This webinar is being recorded, and it is going to be available in the PowerPoint presentation format on Judo Canada website for everybody to see in the future. The same webinar is also available, has been presented by Nicolas Brisson 1.5 hours ago in French. So those of you who would prefer to hear it in French will have the option of listening to it in French. All participants in this webinar must record their real name in the registration form that you registered for this webinar if you want to have your professional development points assigned for the National Coaching Certification Program. In the past, some of the participants in variety of webinars offer nicknames or whatever else with CC number, which is the Coaching Certification Program number, which sometimes is correct, sometimes it's not, which makes it much more difficult to find your name, in particular when there is no proper name. So make sure that you have your name properly spelled out in the registration. During the webinar, all of you are muted. Nicolas Brisson makes sure that we conduct it without interference. However, if you have questions, you can at any time put it in the chat box, and after we conclude the presentation, we are going to address questions to our best abilities. And that's all of the basic information on the registration. Why do we have a new incarnation of the long-term development model? It is not something that Judo Canada took on lightly, and in particular myself, I didn't take it lightly because I was the main author of the previous incarnation, which was produced over 15 years ago. And everybody who went to school through university programs understands probably that going back to the same project several years later, it's a significant pain somewhere. And that was also my reaction to this big project. Yet, as a national sport organization, we do not have an option but to go where we need to go and where we have to go. There is a significant number of organizations. You see the logos of those organizations that pretty much require Judo Canada to have a long-term development model 3.0. That is part of our evaluation by Sport Canada towards the next quadrennial for in so-called Sport Federation Accountability Framework. Sport federations that do not comply with this kind of requirement are suffering mostly financially, but not only. So Government of Canada, on the podium, the Canadian Olympic Committee, the Canadian Paralympic Committee, the Canadian Centre for Ethics and Sport, the Coaching Association of Canada, but more than anybody else is the so-called Sport for Life. You see in the center of the slide their logo, which we most commonly refer to as CS for Life, for L acronym, but that's what they are. This is an organization that has been created in Canada approximately 15 years ago as a group of volunteers. Now this is an incorporated independent entity that actually works with all of the national sport organization on behalf of Sport Canada, and they monitor development of the long-term development program across all sports in Canada. Across all sports, I mean, it's over 70 sport organizations that are being subjected to this kind of requirement. You see also a logo of the International Judo Federation. To much lesser degree, their impact on what we do in Canada is less obvious in our projects. However, whatever they decide to do in terms of changes to regulation of the competition, etc., competition calendar, it significantly impacts on number of factors within our long-term development model. What is new in the Judoka for Life? Unlike the initial long-term development model, which focused on mostly development matrix of athletes, in this incarnation of the long-term development model, we are offering much more information to the best of our knowledge and best of our abilities on a variety of different factors. Canadian sport has put slightly different objectives for their for the well-being of the Canadian sports systems. When the first long-term development model was created, the main objective was to deliver the best possible programs for the high-performance athletes so they can actually deliver at the highest level of international competition. Just going back a little bit to why that kind of approach has been adopted in Canada, I'll go back to a little bit of history and remind all of us that Canada organized 2 Olympic Games in 1976 and 1988, Montreal and Calgary. And the outcome for the Canadian sport community was not that great. Canada won 0 gold medals in both of those Olympic Games. And when Olympic Games in Vancouver was awarded to Canada 10 years prior to 2010, the government came up with an idea that this time we should actually promote Canadian sport with some success at the international stage. That generated a number of different initiatives, and the long-term development model, first developed by Sport Canada and then by all of the sport organizations, has been created, the first incarnation of that model. So we are 16 years later working on LTD and 3.0. The key principles behind the new model are outlined in the slide that you can see. So besides the best programming for the athletes, the model had to focus on optimal structure of the entire sport industry in Canada, on the quality of programming that is being offered to our participants across Canada. Inclusion in our sports systems is, as defined by Sport Canada, non-negotiable. Safe sport initiatives that always existed, but not to the extent and not in the form as they exist now, are highly emphasized in the new model. And Judo for development, or sport for development, when it looks at the entire industry of the Canadian sports system in Canada, has been identified as something that we have to pay attention to when we are addressing long-term development model of our sport. To those of you who may not be aware of the fact, the sport industry in Canada is the 12th largest industry that generates economic spin-off in a variety of different areas, and those spin-offs we are addressing as a national sport organization in the past few years. you may realize, you may remember the times when our national championships were organized every year in different location for a variety of different reasons. You probably remember that the past 7 years where we have had national championships organized in 3 consecutive years in Calgary in the same location, and the next 3 years were scheduled to take place in Edmonton. Unfortunately, the pandemic derailed that program, and we only were able to organize the first Open Nationals in Edmonton, and the next 2 years we had to unfortunately cancel it. But economic impact of those events organized in the same location is quite significant. We have economic impact model that demonstrated that economic impact on Calgary was over 2.5 million on an annual basis. And that is significant initiative that also generates interest from the local organizing municipalities, who are seeing that hosting judo event is actually very beneficial to them, as it is also to us. This slide demonstrates a big snapshot of what the long-term development model is, but again, this particular slide focuses on the long-term athlete development matrix, how we call it now. It's not offering information on all the other areas that the long-term development model is addressing today. So what you see here is what some of you may remember from different format of a similar concept and similar message that has been produced and distributed to dojos across Canada in 2012, after Antoine Valois-Fortier won his medal in Olympic Games in London. And that featured similar information in slightly different layout. But again, this information that you are seeing in this on this particular slide is a snapshot of what the long-term development matrix of athletes should look like from the moment they start in judo until the moment they end their life in judo or in judo. Some of us may be able to do that, hopefully. The new long-term development model is organized in 4 chapters, and the chapter number 1 is called Good Places. And in Good Places, we are referring to national sport organizations, provincial territorial sport organization, clubs, and then national and regional training centers. I will start with the national and regional training centers. Obviously, this is not a new concept. Canada, for the past, as long as many of us can remember, always had a national training center, whether it was a formal or informal entity. It existed in Canada. What we have right now is a world-class national training center located at the National Sport Institute Quebec in Montreal. And being the sport organization as we are, which is relatively small in numbers and even smaller in terms of number of competitive athletes, the recognition of such reality within the sport industry is that without National Training Center, there is no possibility to be competitive at the world stage against nations that offer much greater access to good quality programming for high performance athletes. So in recognition of the fact that this is absolute necessity for national sport organizations to have, the emphasis on national and regional training centers as part of the athlete development matrix towards high performance and elite performance is absolute necessity. Clubs, good programs. What do they represent for clubs? We are offering in the long-term development model a number of different suggestions, what good clubs should do, how they should operate. Again, recognizing the reality that Canada has such a vast differences in terms of social, cultural reality, economic reality, and geography, that what we are suggesting is, to the best of our knowledge and the best of our ability, what could be done, what should be done, without actually trying to force anybody to do what is being proposed. What the long-term development model suggests, however, is that recognition of roles and responsibilities within the system is absolutely crucial. So as it applies to clubs, it also applies to the provincial and territorial organizations. And the suggestion is that a very clear definition of roles and responsibilities are being put in place and agreed upon by all of the members of the community. We just are not big enough and strong enough to work in opposite directions. We have to all work in the same direction if we want to accomplish something that is meaningful. What is also important for clubs is a suggestion that clubs actually recognize what they really are. We have still a lot of misconception within our community, larger community, that things are possible that really are not. And obviously, it's not the role of Judo Canada to tell to anyone what you are or to suggest what you should be, but it is probably the right thing to do for club leaders to determine what their role in the system is and what they are actually trying to accomplish in their programming. It is as important for the club leadership as it is for the participants in the club, so they actually have a very honest point of reference where they are in what they are doing. For that reason, the roles and responsibilities within a system is very, very important from the perspective of the long-term development model. The long-term development model is also very clear on the fact that without successful clubs, there is no successful judo in our country. So the clubs is the most important element that we hope that we are able to offer information that is going to support you in your efforts to become the best you can be and offer the best programming to the participants in your programs. There is a lot of information in the long-term development model manual itself. I did not say that the manual has been produced in English, vetted by a number of different members of our community, but also vetted by number of different contractors from outside of judo community to make sure that we are living up to the expected standards of this incarnation of the long-term development model. But it is a multi-document publication. It's not one book that could offer all the information in one space. There is a lot of links in that manual that lead you to somewhere else, to different source of resources. And anyone who is interested in finding information that is applicable to your particular situation, hopefully will find this kind of information available and made available to you. One of those resources, obviously, many of us are often using this as the toolbox for clubs in the Judo Canada website, which offers quite a significant number of different documents and links to different documents. And this group of documents, or this part of the Judo Canada website is ever increasing, and it is going to include additional information as quickly as it is produced. So I strongly recommend to all of the coaches to reach into that resource available to you, Toolbox for Clubs webpage on Judo Canada development links. What are good programs in Canada? It's something of a conundrum because as you find it in the manual, there is a practical explanation. Why do we have to look at the long-term development model from this perspective? In many countries, the active start, the fundamentals, and the learn to train, the first three stages when our children gets involved in judo programs, are not even considered as part of the long-term development model. They are part of physical literacy programs that are offered by a variety of different sports, judo included. The reality of Canadian judo is that when it comes to high-performance competitors that Canada produced, the most successful high-performance competitors who were either medalists of the World Championships or Olympic Games, none of those competitors started judo beyond the learn to train development stage. I'm abstracting here from Mark Berger, who is present here because he was not a product of the Canadian judo system. I'm abstracting from Douglas Rogers, who was partially a member of the Canadian judo system, started judo much later, but he practically developed his competitive capacity in Japan, living there for 5 years prior to the Olympic Games in 1964. And I'm abstracting here from Krista Deguchi. So those three prominent Canadian judoka are not included in the long-term development model as examples of successful Canadian world and Olympic medalists. Everyone outside of this group of three, which includes Phil Takahashi, Kevin Doherty, Jessica Klimkat, Catherine Bushman-Pinard, Antoine Valois-Fortier, and Nicolas Guillot, those are all of the people who succeeded at the world and Olympic stage. All of them started judo in very early childhood. For this reason, in Canada, we say start, stay, and succeed at judo is something that what we are looking for. Because we do not have examples of athletes who actually succeeded at the highest level, who started judo beyond the learn to train development stage. Obviously, there are some exceptions, and we cannot exclude or determine with authority that examples of different pathways towards success at the highest level is possible. It's possible. Other countries demonstrate that it is possible. But again, in Canada, we did not experience that possibility yet. So we are still at the stage of actually our current understanding is that in our system, our social, cultural, geographical reality in Canada, if we want to see athletes succeeding at the world stage, we should look at athletes who are in our system from the very early development stage. What we, however, emphasize in the long-term development model is that regardless of the fact that that's what we are looking for in the Canadian reality, the first three development stages are so-called pre-specialization development stages. That means that athletes who join judo at the age of 5 or at the age of 10, prior to them being 11, 12 years old, we are not going to recommend any kind of specialized judo programs that are going to involve high level of competition or high number of competition or emphasis of competition-specific technical development or competition-specific tactical development. Those are the stages where we are highly recommending development of athletic abilities, development of basic physical literacy skills. What is physical literacy, however, today is being somewhat differently, is being framed somewhat differently than what we used to in the past. In the past, we were pretty much talking about basic physical motor abilities. Today, we are also talking about emotional and cognitive needs of children at those development stages. So it's much greater and more comprehensive picture of what physical literacy actually means in this pre-specialization development stages and how they impact the further development of athletes in their specialization stages. Other very important aspects of the approach to the long-term development athletes is I've covered the many pathways for a judoka are possible to lead to high performance success at the highest level, but that's not exactly what we are looking for the long-term development model in general. What we are looking for is to impact the well-being of the Canadian society. And in recognition that 90+% of all participants in sports, including judo, is never going to be on the highway towards high performance. They are going to stay on the pathway to fit for life. Good programming in those optimal programming, not just good, optimal programming in all of those development stages, during all of those development stages, optimal program offered based on the needs of the participants as opposed to needs of the program is absolutely crucial. Well-being of the society in the long term. Inclusion is non-negotiable. What does it mean? It means that whoever comes to our programs has to be welcomed, and not just formally welcomed. They have to feel welcomed and accepted in the programs. It's been my personal experience that on some occasions, athletes with disabilities are not really welcome with open hearts and open minds. They may be formally welcomed in the system, but there is no compassion-led initiative that would actually make them feel that they are welcome, make them emotionally recognizing that this is their space as it is anybody else's space. And that's very important distinguishment between formal welcome and real welcome into the programs. Another basic principle, which is at this time actually no different from what was emphasized in the past, the first incarnation of the long-term development model producing the Take It to the Mat, is the adolescent participant needs. And again, we are talking about both physical development needs as much as cognitive and emotional development needs. So this is majorly emphasized in this long-term development model. Another part of that particular aspect is emphasis on physical development needs during the growth spurt. Again, not a new concept, but this time is overemphasized and emphasized again with much more attention to details on what to pay attention to at specific times of development of the individuals during their early pre-puberty, during puberty, and post-puberty. So the so-called windows of trainability are re-emphasized again. And actually what this long-term development model manual is offering to all of the coaches is an appendices at the end of that production that are offering charts that are enabling coaches, parents, and children to actually determine their stage of growth spurt, the pubertal development. There are questionnaires that are going to inform coaches who will be interested in pursuing that avenue, at what stage of their adolescents are they? And that would inform again the coaches which part of physical preparation and physical development should be mostly paid attention to during particular stage of their growth spurt. So it's a little bit of complicated message, but at the same time, something that is being highly emphasized by the entire sports system in Canada. The last part is focus on the golden age participants in sports. And Judo is actually a very good example of successful implementation of programs for our golden age participants. And the discussion we had with Gerald at the onset of this meeting about the kata participants in Canada and masters participants in competition, or masters participants in just judo programs who are enjoying being on the mat on weekly basis with their peers and practicing variety of aspects of judo, or being there just for the social interaction with their colleagues and friends. And this aspect of fit for life is something that is highly emphasized by the general sport community in Canada. Again, in judo, we have been extremely successful when it comes to competition of our masters. You probably are aware of the fact that Canada actually produced over 40 world champions in the Master World Championships. Mostly, we were very successful at the early stages of the movement, where Canadians actually were the leaders of the development of this movement. Lise Roach and Jim Walker were one of the first who actually promoted this movement until it was taken over by the International Judo Federation and became much more prominent on the international stage. But again, as a community, judo community in Canada, we should be very proud of this development and of what our master athletes were able to accomplish and what they contributed to the development of this movement on the world stage. The first part of the athlete development matrix is the stages of development that are actually should be focusing on physical literacy development. And again, definition of the physical literacy, physical competence in a variety of movement, and understanding of the value for engagement and physical activity for life. That is the definition that we've been living for the past 15 years. What has changed in this incarnation of the long-term development model is that it increases the emphasis on psychological components, including fostering confidence and motivation, as well as social connectedness. Well, we are very, very successful in developing physical literacy in participants in judo programs. What we are not successful in as national sport organization, or should I say the judo movement in Canada, is to convince the external sport system that judo is actually one of the most comprehensive and most beneficial movement sports for development of children. You probably are aware of the fact that judo is included as fundamental movement skills promotional sports in a huge number of countries all over the world. And what is more frustrating for us than anything else is that so many of those countries offer very similar social cultural reality to Canada. Countries like France, like Benelux countries, Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg, Germany, Italy, Spain, all of those countries are really very similar when it comes to social cultural reality. They are different in terms of geographic reality. That is a big challenge for us. But in all of those countries I mentioned, judo is being recognized as one of those fundamental movement skill sports that are very beneficial for development of the future athletes, regardless of whether they stay in judo or not. In Canada, our organization is actively lobbying the sport community to include judo in that group of sports, which right now include gymnastics, include swimming, include skating, include skiing, but not judo. It's quite understandable why in Canada we have winter sports, skiing and skating, but frankly, those are not fundamental movement skills. Those are artificial movement skills developed with number of different prompts that human beings do not use if not necessary. So again, that's a challenge for Judo Canada to further lobby the sport community to include judo. But until that moment happens, our job is to ensure that whoever comes to judo programs during those pre-specialization development stages are going to get the optimal programming that is going to make them as good athletes as possible prior to the age of 12. As good athletes as possible, not necessary in judo. As good athletes as possible, that means they understand and they enjoy movement, they understand what judo offers, they understand the basic principal movement skills that we are offering on our mats every day when they are there, and that they are motivated, they like what they do, actually much more than like. They have to fall in love with our sport if we want to have a chance to maintain them in our programs during their later development stages. The biggest challenge we have in our Canadian sports system, although it's not just Canadian sports system, it's pretty much a similar situation all over the world. The biggest challenge we face is that 80% of children who start judo during their active start, fundamentals, and learn to train development stages, so under the age of 12, 80% of those children do not continue in our sport past the age of 12. That is a huge number of potential participants in judo whom we are losing. And one of the initiatives in the LTD 3.0 is to develop, or is being developed, exit or post-season or end of the season questionnaire that is going to be distributed to all of the clubs across Canada, and with emphasis on have athletes, have their parents, have anybody involved in the program fill out those questionnaires so we have better understanding of why are we losing this many children and what needs to happen in order to encourage greater number of those participants to stay in judo for longer. Am I boring you, or are you still okay and with me? Hopefully, I am not. I've witnessed the same presentation by Nicolas Brisson. He presented it in French to a Francophone audience, and it was a smaller audience. And Nicolas, who participate with development of the long-term development model and actually he produced this presentation for all of us because he is much more IT oriented than myself. And he made this presentation in French, and I was impressed how well everybody was receiving it and how involved everybody was in this presentation when he spoke for close to 1 hour. So I hope that I'm going to match his performance at least and not bore you to death.
Andrea, everyone is still attending and ready to carry on.
And any questions you may have that come up during the presentation, put it in the chat box because we are going to address them at the end of this presentation. We are at the middle point approximately, so stay with me. And we are almost 50 minutes, actually 45. Okay, I'll speed up a little bit. Good programs for high performance. What does it mean? It's pretty much presented in what you see in the front of you. What changed from the past long-term development model is the fact that Judo Canada over the past 7 years developed so-called gold medal profile, which was requested from our organization by Own the Podium, one of the organizations that decides on our financial well-being. And long years of research of what is actually happening in our athletes generated information that we never had before. And the information has been classified in 4 categories. Actually, it was classified in 5, but 4 of them were included in so-called key performance factors, determined by, again, multi-sport generic model for all sports, psychological, technical, tactical, and physical key performance factors that have been classified in 20 different major key performance factors, and each of them was evaluated from 0.1, the lowest, to 4, the highest. And if you multiply 4 by 20, you have 80 points maximum possible. That's how we can evaluate our athletes now. They're evaluated on the 20 high performance key performance factors. And what we are looking for in athletes at the world stage, competing at the world stage and potentially successful at the world stage, is those athletes meeting those standards at minimum of 80% of the maximum points. So if you are going to look into the long-term development model, you actually have examples, not examples by name, because that would violate the PIPEDA Act, but information on what we are actually looking from athletes who are at the development stage when we are welcoming them into the national team program at the INS. What should they represent in a variety of different factors to be able to actually be capable of handling first the training and then the demands of the competition and finally the demands of the highest level competition. What we are looking for is 75 to 80% of maximum score in those 20 high performance factors. So development of the gold medal profile influenced some changes to the generic model from the model that we had 15 years ago put in place. And to be frank, 15 years ago, we didn't have all the information, but the information that we included in the model 15 years ago was quite consistent with what we still have today in the model. So we were not far off 15 years ago from what we know today, with much greater data supporting our model. New programs that you are going to see, those of the coaches who just recently took competition development courses with me, and I see a number of you here, major changes are happening to the competition development program with variety of different new protocols in place. For example, new testing protocols for physical capacity of our athletes. The U18 testing protocol is being introduced right now, and again, based on data that has been accumulated at the National Training Center over the past 7 years, data collected by professionals, by coaches working with conditioning and strength only, and then generated by all the professional coaches working with our national team at the INS in cooperation with those specialists in strength and conditioning. So quite a new number of significant developments happening. And again, you are going to have access to all of it when the manual, the full manual, is going to be made available to you. We also slightly modified the talent identification factors. Good question came around from the Francophone participants a few minutes ago. That talent identification in judo is quite impossible, and we as judo specialists agree with that, but it is very difficult to convince the outside resources outside of judo that judo has a significant challenge with talent identification, because you just look at the current Olympic Games in Tokyo. where two Canadian athletes won gold medals 2 years after they were being identified through the Royal Bank talent identification programs. One athlete in rowing won a gold medal in team of 8, and a gold medal won by female athlete in track cycling. Was 2 years after she was identified as energy machine and taken from soccer program into bicycling and became an Olympic champion. So talent identification in some sports is quite straightforward and easy to do. In sports like judo, we have huge number of factors that can generate talent that has actually capacity to compete on the world stage. So again, for coaches interested, you are going to have a variety of new tools that this long-term development offers, that the testing protocol for athletes under 18, that's one. I already mentioned the questionnaire that is going to allow coaches to determine what stage of puberty their athletes are, which in turn is going to create more opportunities for appropriate physical development training at different development stages. Good programming for athletes who are now entering into the specialization stage. And this is very important for all of us to realize when we are talking about optimization of our programming and understanding the roles within a system. The specialization in judo should not happen prior to the under 14, under 16 is still possible. And those are the times when athletes are going to decide whether they actually have a desire to continue towards the high performance pathway, and there are minimum standards that they should be able to meet or that they are required to meet at this stage in terms of accumulating competition experience, in terms of number of competition as well as number of bouts in the competition. What are their needs for number of trainings on the mat, number of trainings off the mat, etc., etc. So this is all pretty well laid out in the long-term development model, and you are going to be able to find all of this information there. It is also important to mention that athletes who do not decide on the high performance pathway, and the decision actually may not belong to them. The decision sometimes belongs to the reality of life. Many young people may have a desire to become Olympians and Olympic champions, but their reality that surrounds them is such that in the current circumstances, it will be very, very difficult or almost impossible to go that way. That's why it is important for sport leaders in our program to honestly evaluate their capacity in the system, whether you are capable of delivering something or not. And that honest information has to be shared with athletes at this stage of development, most of the time with their parents, to ensure that if there is desire and there is a need for something to do in order to make that desire or that dream come true, there are pathways that have to be taken. And in certain circumstances, those pathways are not possible. There are athletes who came from community clubs. Nicola Tritton is one of those who came from community club that offered once per week program that incorporated athletes from the age of 5 to age of 75. And that community program ran for years. And the kudo to the leader of the program was that from the very early stages of development of Nicola Tritton, the parents of Nicola Tritton were made aware that if he wants to really go for his dream, he has to move away from that community club. So this kind of reality is known in our reality of judo, but not always acknowledged and not always capitalized on. So again, this is the time when the decision happens. I will also add that it's not Judo Canada's intention to ensure that majority of athletes are going to stay on the pathway of high performance. Quite to the contrary, we recognize that it is not for everybody. Not everybody will be able to, will be willing to, will be capable of doing that. Programming for those athletes is equally important. Optimal programming for those athletes who do not go on the high performance program pathway is equally important as it is for those athletes who are going on the high performance pathway. For the development of athletes on the train to compete development stage, this is where we are recommending that those who are most talented and most interested, most dedicated, who have desire and love of judo, that's the time when they should move at the minimum to the regional training center, but optimally to the national training center where they can actually progress in the most effective daily training environment towards their goals. Again, the parameters of the programs remain as it is, as it was in the past. Not much has changed, except now we have much greater knowledge, or let's say the system has much greater knowledge what athletes needs to be able to accomplish, what they need to do, how to prepare, etc. at this development stage. And the daily training environment offered at the National Training Center in Montreal is actually world-class, and none of us needs to be convinced of that, because the results of Canadian athletes over the past 7 years at the international stage are the best message that we can actually share with anybody. Judo Canada never seen the number of athletes performing at really high level from the cadet age, junior age, and our senior athletes obviously also than what is happening over the past few years. I'm deliberately accelerating this presentation because, again, I cannot cover everything that is being offered in the long-term development model manual. And what everyone who is interested in it will be able to find in this presentation, in this manual, in a few days from now, available on Judo Canada website. Good programs for the train to win. Again, it means that we cannot offer better training environment to our athletes than what it is being offered right now at the National Training Center. And what our athletes are experiencing there is support on their physiological and psychological challenges. They have individual training plans that are reflecting on their individual capacities. Their volume and intensity of training is being adjusted according to what they are able to do and what is the best for them. Very often I have as a facilitator of the National Coaching Certification Program, questions being asked, what is the individualization of training when you have 60 to 70 to 100 athletes on the mat and the training looks every day the same? The reality is each of those athletes who are actually involved in the high performance program and are post their entry stage into the National Training Center is very well informed on what is the best for them and how do they need to proceed with their individualized approach to their training, as opposed to having everybody in the same bucket, which, by the way, are systems in the world that work like that, and systems that offer a very high level of natural selection, like system in Japan, for example. They may operate in that way and be extremely successful for that reason and variety of other reasons, obviously. But implementation of exactly the same kind of approach in Canada would be futile to our athletes and to our system, which is well understood in the long-term development model. Fit for life, again, something that is emphasized in the long-term development model, is as important as it is the pathway towards high performance. Fit for life in the long-term development model, you find several additional chapters that are going to offer more information on what is recommended. Again, recommended based on the best knowledge of those few people who worked on this incarnation of the model. But what in general we can all agree on is that Fit for Life is pretty much offering the kind of daily training environment that we demonstrated as the most preferable option for the under 14, which 2 to 4 training sessions per week, and with a limited number of competitions, occasional competitions, or no competitions at all, or people who enter into judo later in life and just look for social interaction, for good programs that are going to enhance their well-being and their health, etc. Plus, for those of us judo lifers, obviously things like coaching, instructing, involvement in kata competition, for some of us involvement in the master competition programs, etc. But also many invaluable assets to Judo Canada, like many of you who are volunteers for life, without whom any kind of programming in judo would be practically impossible. All of our competitions are relying practically exclusively on volunteers. The involvement of the professional numbers of employees of Judo Canada, plus all the provincial associations across Canada, provincial and territorial associations now, is such a negligent number that it would not be possible to actually offer any kind of meaningful judo programming, not to mention competition, without involvement of this army of volunteers. Chapter 3, good people. What does it mean in the long-term development model? Again, those chapters is not something that I came with this idea about. The good programs, good people are generic slogans used in the generic long-term development model. And what we did is adopt the generic model into Judo Canada's reality. So if you ever look at the long-term development model, the good people, good programs is only a very small part of the long-term development model. What we decided on Judo Canada, best approach is to structure our long-term development model into exactly those chapters. So what are good people? Good leaders, good coaches, and good parents. Good leaders and good coaches and good athletes. All of us have to live by the code of conduct and ethics that has been adopted for Judo Canada from a universal code of conduct and ethics that has been not promoted, pretty much given from Sport Canada to all of the sport organizations, and we were being told, adapt it to your needs and implement it in your programs. That is a very comprehensive document. If you are not familiar with that, you have access to it in the long-term development model. It's actually permanently placed on Judo Canada website, and everyone can at any time check what it means. But it is much more comprehensive, and unfortunately for reality of life, it includes a lot of additional parameters that we never had in the past in the so-called code of conduct. So safe sport is included in that, and what it means is much different today than what we understood as a safe sport even 10 years ago. So how do we behave, what we do, what we can do, and what we cannot do under any circumstances is part of the good leaders approach. And again, for a good understanding of what it means, reach to the code of conduct. Good coaches. Judo Canada promotes professional coaching, and professional not in terms that you become a professional and work in judo for life, but your approach, whether you are volunteering or not, has to be professional. And again, that comes with a good code of conduct, good behavior, what we are expected and required to do, and what we are expected and required not to do. But good coaches and Judo Canada promotion doesn't come without some tools that actually enable members of our community to become professional coaches. And we have examples of sports that are not that dissimilar from judo. Let's look at jiu-jitsu that just exploded on our market in the past 20 years. It didn't exist 20 years ago. And look how many professionals are delivering recreational quality, very good quality programs, and how popular Brazilian jiu-jitsu became in the country. We have that option in judo to become professionals. And options are enhanced today by the fact that there is so-called Canadian Professional Coaches Association, which is part of the Coaching Association of Canada. And they actually offer to all coaches who are certified NCCP coaches to become professional coaches. They offer free legal advice. They offer dental and health benefits. They offer liability insurance and professional development opportunities that didn't exist in the past. So if any coach would think, and in the changing environment of Canada, including what is happening now during the pandemic, etc., if anybody, any of you or any of your young athletes decides that let's try it, encourage them to do it, go the professional way, and perhaps they are going to be successful, and perhaps they are going to offer something to our community that it's so uncommon today, because we have less than 20 people who make their living with coaching judo in Canada. And that is pretty insignificant number when we compare to swimming that has 3,500 professional coaches making their living with swimming. And 20 versus 3,500. It's something that we should be aware of. That there is an option for today, next generation of lifers in judo to become professional coaches. Chapter 4, and very briefly, we are addressing 4 different areas that we are required to address and we are willing to address. Girls and women in judo, the only program in Canada that has equal representation of males and females in judo is National Team Program. Every other program has significantly lower numbers of females versus males. We are still macho man-dominated community in most of our programs. That has to change. We hope that it is changing, but it has to change sooner rather than later to ensure that female is valued equally in our programs as the males are, and that programs for females are addressing the needs of the female individual in a judo program. That starts from girls, very early stage, to adult individuals. And the barriers that female participants in judo face, we are looking for information on what the barriers are and trying actually to address those in programs that we have impact on. Second part is the involvement of Indigenous Canadians in judo, which the effort towards reconciliation is a very important part of what we are trying to do. And we are actually very lucky and very grateful for what is happening in certain parts of Canada. Yukon, Northwest Territory, more than any other parts of Canada. Nunavut, to some extent, in the past and still continuing, but also northern part of Saskatchewan, some communities in British Columbia, and few other communities across Canada offer significant, very good programs to Indigenous Canadians. We actually, as an organization, attempted to create adapted Q syllabus for the Indigenous communities across Canada. It wasn't so well received across the board because In the process of trying to do that, we learned that about the huge variety or huge variety of different cultural entities within the indigenous population alone, which makes the Judo Canada proposal somewhat inapplicable in certain circumstances. But still, there is a project that you are welcome to look into and probably use if you find it applicable in programs, if you have indigenous Canadians involved in the programs. Again, that's part of the LTDM and is being offered as part of the additional resources associated with the new project. Finally, judoka with a disability. I already mentioned that earlier, that inclusion is non-negotiable, and that applies to all of the judo programs that we run across Canada. And we hope that our community is mature enough to understand what it means. Additional initiative that Judo Canada is just finalized. Actually, Monsieur Brisson finalized this project. We are making a new project or new webinar or online learning available to all of us, all of our community, on intellectual disability. And that is a newly developed course, newly developed by Judo Canada. We have cooperated with European Agency for programs for physically disabled, and that has been actually produced and is being posted on Judo Canada website as we speak. It will be a professional development online course that any one of you can take, and it teaches us about variety of physical disabilities, what they are, what are the differences between variety of those, and how to handle athletes, how to create optimal programming for athletes with variety of different mental and physical disabilities. So which is a great new tool for all of us again. I think I've covered most of the topics that have been offered in this PowerPoint presentation. If you have any questions after we finish today's exercise, you can reach out to me. My email address is readily available on Judo Canada website at any time to anyone. And Nicolas Brisson, who is the sport director now. By the way, my role has changed. Last year, until last year, I performed the duty of sport director. That included the coaching education. But with employment of Nicolas Brisson, a new asset, phenomenal asset to our organization, Nicolas Brisson took on the duties of the sport director, and I have been my responsibility has been changed to coaching and education development, and obviously I maintain the portfolio of the Paralympic program until I've committed until Paris. After which I will say goodbye, and I'm saying goodbye to you now. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to throw it at me.
Andre, just quickly, we had a question from Alan Sakai. He was wondering if it was a coincidence that the loss of participants arise the more we move into train-to-train development stage.
Alan, this is not a coincidence. It's not a trend that is unique to Canada. I mentioned that. This is a trend that is practically observed in almost all sports that starts programming, sport programming for children. The difference between Judo and some of those programs is that in all their programs, majority of the departing from the sport happens at the puberty time. In Judo, it happens a little bit earlier than that. Whether it has anything to do with the fact that we suggest specialization at the age of under 12, under 14, sorry, under 14, under 16. I don't think so, because we didn't suggest that in the long-term development model prior to today. The trend of departing from our sports are pretty consistent over the past decades. It's not something that happened recently. What we know, what we learned from exchange of information and literature, etc., and from common sense, is that children who come to our dojos are not coming because they love judo. It's because their parents bring them to judo. And when they become independent enough, which happens at the early stages of pre-puberty in Canada, when they are 11, 12, 13 years old, and they have, for the first time in their life, more ability to say what they want and they don't want, they will decide to change. There is also a huge emphasis in the Canadian education system to experience variety of different sporting activities at early stages of lives. And kids are encouraged to change, jump from one sport to another. And it's nothing wrong with that. We do not recommend that we enslave children in judo. What we recommend is to offer programming that is going to be so attractive to those kids, but they don't want to depart from judo. And what we know and we experience in variety of different judo clubs in Canada is that programs for children are not attractive enough. They are on many occasions they are focusing on discipline as opposed to physical movement and enjoyment of movement and ability to do things in somewhat unorthodox but unorganized fashion, as opposed to very strict fashion, as we believe this is one of the strengths of judo programs. And it is, but not for children who are under the age of 12, who need to be spontaneous, who need to be allowed to do things that actually come instinctively to them and generate the joy of movement without being restricted to what they have to do or they cannot do. So it's a lot of optimization of the programming that we are suggesting in programs for children that hopefully will generate a little bit more love for the sport itself. So I'm not sure, Alan, that this is obviously a subject that can be debated, and there is not one answer to it. But we are looking for solutions. What I mentioned earlier, the questionnaire that we are going to distribute is about what do they like, what they don't like, etc., and generate information about generate data. During the previous seminar, French seminar, one of the participants suggested that this is a project that should be conducted by universities. So Judo Canada doesn't have the capacity to do it properly and to generate enough reliable information. And probably this is something that if we can find somebody who is willing to take on this kind of a challenge, we definitely may look into that in the future.
Andre, we have another additional question from Rob. You mentioned during your presentation that you view as development stage additional to the perspective of physical development transition through puberty. And he was wondering if this was based on the Tanner stage of development.
Once again, I'm not sure I understand exactly what the question is.
Rob, I don't know, maybe if you can unmute yourself and maybe better explain what you were expecting. Maybe I didn't correctly.
Yep, thank you, Nicola. So Andre, I was wondering if, so there's something called the Tanner stages of development, which help you identify as a youth moves through puberty, which stage they're at and what sort of activities they might be ready for. I was wondering if that was something that was, because you were mentioning that we're looking more, rather than saying, oh, you're a U14, so here's what we're doing for you. Oh,
No,
you're a
no,
U16.
no. Robert Kingston, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can recognize your voice. Very good one. Robert, there is a chart that is called the peak height velocity progression for both males and females. And this is what you are talking about. This is exact information on at what stage of puberty females are capable of, or should, what the coaches should focus on, which physical activity should predominate their training objectives. And it's different from, it changes from month to month. The puberty usually lasts no longer than 3 years. And within those 3 years, there are windows of opportunity for development of speed, which is different from the window of opportunity for development of endurance and strength, etc. And it's different from males and females. And both of those charts are included in the long-term development model. And what we didn't have in the past, we had this information in the past, but we didn't have questionnaires that would help coaches to understand at what stage of puberty their athletes are. Now, in the long-term development model, you find those self-determining questionnaires that your athletes can fill up, and you will know.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Maybe if anyone else has a question, do not hesitate.
Josie Degg has her hand up, just so you know.
I have a question. I have 2 athletes that are have Down syndrome. And my issue is we want to include them, and they're included in our group. And they see athletes go to competition, and they want to compete. They want to be able to have a medal and do all these things as a athlete should do. But my question is, how are we doing, or is there something implemented in judo to help them achieve that goal? Because I know in our judo competition system, we don't really have that part of the spectrum for athletes. So I don't know if my question is right or wrong, but yeah, I'm just wondering if there's something there we can do for them.
It's a perfect question and very timely question, Jose. What I mentioned at the very end, the new online learning module for athletes, for coaches, how to deal with athletes with special needs. It offers information on a variety of different disabilities, but it focuses on intellectual disability. And Down syndrome is one of those intellectual disabilities that is being quite well described in this manual. And it offers advice to coaches what to do, what not to do, offers information on how to classify athletes in terms of whom they are able to compete against, etc. The challenge we have in North America is that intellectual disabilities are included in Special Olympics, and Special Olympics are quite big. It's actually very big in Europe, and majority of European countries have teams of intellectually disabled athletes competing. In America, we don't have it. We've contacted Special Olympics Canada, and they do not include judo at this point of time. So this is one of the initiatives that Judo Canada is embarking on, to include judo in Special Olympics in North America, and not just abstracting from intellectual disabilities. The indigenous games also do not include judo. They included once in the past as a representation sport. This is also another initiative that Judo Canada is working on, is to have judo included in both indigenous and in Arctic games. And again, we are going to recommend that athletes with intellectual disabilities will have a chance, should have a chance to compete. In the 2021-22 tournament standards and sanction policy that it also is available on Judo Canada website, you can find actually, Jose, if you are interested, you can find classification of athletes with intellectual disabilities, who can compete against whom. and how they are classified. That same information is also included in the webinar I mentioned on intellectual disabilities. So obviously, very timely question, and timely on both sides. You are working with athletes. Just to abstract from this reality, because I work with the Paralympic program, I'm familiar with what is happening in a variety of different countries across the world on the front of intellectual disabilities. So just to inform you, intellectual disability is actually a much bigger movement on the world stage than it is judo in Paralympic program. So it's many more intellectually disabled individuals in judo programs than it is Paralympians. It is very likely that this program is going to grow and eventually become much more prominent, because intellectual disability numbers at in general population is actually growing quite rapidly. And based on information that I have from coaches from Paralympic programs from different countries, including France, is that many coaches who in the past were specializing in judo for visually impaired now moved to judo for athletes with intellectual disability, because it's again variety of reasons why it happened. But one of the reasons is there is quite a lot of resources, financial resources, for support of athletes with intellectual disabilities that are available, readily available. And coaches can reach for those resources, and they will get it. And that I don't think it's not the case in Canada. Also, if you have athletes with intellectual disabilities and you reach out to organizations that support people with special needs, then you can access resources that are not available anywhere else.
Andre, we have a comment and question from Sandra Yusen. She mentioned the fact that she had the opportunity to instruct athletes with a disability, and that she learned a lot from it. And she was mentioning that it will be a very good experience for instructors to be able to teach athletes with such disability. And she was wondering if in some way Judo Canada can help to make this process possible.
Again, in the long-term development model, in that particular part of it, which deals with recommendation for athletes with disabilities, there is a number of very generic recommendations that come from experience and from knowledge that has been gained. Any coach who has ever been involved with athletes with special needs will understand that this is a process that is enriching to everybody who does work with athletes with disability. And from my perspective, it's extremely beneficial to everybody else in the judo program. The reality is that athletes with special needs, there is not enough of athletes with special needs to have programs that are designated for them alone. They have to be part of the larger judo community, and the larger judo community has to be able to generate enough empathy and compassion for those athletes. Without those two elements, there is no chance that those athletes will feel welcome and they will be successful in those programs. My experience as a Paralympic coach over the past 7 years is that the so-called empathy and compassion are much easier to get at judo clubs than they are to get at much more result-oriented entities like national or regional training centers. Although I must say that my experience at the regional training center in Lethbridge in the past year was so phenomenal, and athletes who participated in that had such a good experience that it's exemplary how well it can work. But there are also examples how difficult it is to find this kind of environment that is going to embrace athletes with special needs. So it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that is extremely rewarding from my perspective, both for the coaches as well as all of the individuals involved in the program. Because majority of our members are young people. It's natural that any human being doesn't feel comfortable in presence of somebody of special needs. The first reaction is always the same. It's natural human reaction. Learning how to deal with those reactions is something that is much easier to address when we are dealing with family-oriented environment, which are clubs, than it is when people come to accomplish something in the regional or national training center. So my advice is, if you have athletes with disabilities, embrace them, make everybody in your club aware that those are special needs individuals, and that interaction with those individuals is going to enrich the life of that individual as well as the lives of everybody else who interacts with them. So
I know that Iwan has raised his hands. I don't know if Iwan, you still have a question.
Now, you know what, it'd be less of a question and more of a comment, and I guess it's too big for this platform. Just the idea of like keeping people in judo. You know, I think we need to do a lot of work in it, and how, you know, when we talk about jiu-jitsu and talk about how they keep people in and how it's exploded, and it's quite simple. It's a business model that has nothing to do with high performance, right? And it's a business model that celebrates promotions, which we can do much better at. And I think there's a need for maybe Judo Canada to produce a webinar on the marketing of judo and how to keep people in judo, and maybe reaching out to different sports organizations and things to try to find out, you know, hey, what are you guys doing? Again, for me, it's quite simple. Again, I've been selling this idea in Alberta now for since the summer is we have, you know, when you have a 12-year-old, you know, the sensei's goal shouldn't be to, you know, make them a national champion. First goal is make them a black belt. That's going to try to keep them to at least 16, 17 years old. So how do you develop that program in that sense? You know, through the moral code of judo, through celebrating every promotion, through celebrating, and again, there's just not enough things in judo that makes a person that's like reinforcing that they're getting better, reinforcing achievement. You know, these are the things that are really that we need to kind of look at in how to revitalize judo clubs and how to celebrate our sport, and make sure that, you know, the parents and that the kids are like constantly going, oh, right, you know what, I'm close to getting my next grade. Oh, great, I just got the player of the month at the judo club. I want to, you know, the next kid wants to win that. Like ideas like this is how we need to start thinking about, and that also ties in with, if we want to make professional judo clubs, we need to have a system, and we need to have a program that's you can go to somebody that's 20 years old and say, here's your package. Have you ever considered, because you can be successful doing something that you love. So like I said, it's more of a rant, and I'll leave it at that, because I could keep going for hours and hours. Thank you.
Very, very valid point, Ewan, and thank you for sharing that. And definitely something that we can further exploit as a national organization, as much as national organization can impact this kind of approach. Definitely, thank you very much for sharing with us.
Andre, we have a question from Anne. I think it will be the last question. Anne.
Andre, sir, Sensei, can you hear me?
Of course, yes.
Okay, I have a question. This is following up with Ewan. For some reason, I have a lot of jiu-jitsu students coming to my club. I don't know why, but they seem to like that place. And then there are a lot of them, they would love me to go to show up to their place and give them seminar and teach them. And a lot of them want to be graded somehow. And then I kind of get caught in the middle because of the organization of what we have, structure of what we have in Canada, Judo Canada, Judo Alberta, Judo BC, whatever, and then to the club. And then the sensei can only grade to where it should be. And some of these guys, they are remote sometimes. They are in a small little town. They have their own little club. And then they want to come, that they cannot come that much. They come sometime once a month or twice a month, and I have to say this, they are very respectful. Their hearts are in judo, they want it, but we cannot do nothing much for them. I think we should have a program to do something about, from what I can see, it's like a mobile coaching system somehow to help them out, because if we want participation in judo, to promote judo, I think we should have some kind of program that to help out with insurance of the coaching or whatever. I leave it up to the top guy to think about that. Maybe this is another problem, another situation that we have, that like there are a lot of jiu-jitsu guys want to do judo, but and they cannot do anything much because they all belong to something else, and they want to come under certain umbrella of judo for us to help them. Please think about that.
Well, it is way too big of a question and way too big of a problem. That it's consistent with what Yuan said. It's Jiu-Jitsu has a different model. Sometimes we are caught in between the high performance requirement from national sport organization, because we have to focus on that. That's why we are being recognized as a national sport organization and being given money.
I think they are realizing now, Sensei, I think they realize that they need judo to help to do their performance on their side also.
Well,
but their hearts are with judo. They understand, they start to understand more and more about what jiu-jitsu is, what judo is. So
jiu-jitsu is not recognized as a national sport organization in Canada. They know that they need judo for their own benefit, not for the benefit of judo. They want to have some judo skills to teach elements of judo in their jiu-jitsu program. It's a much bigger challenge that we as a sport, we lost huge opportunity. But we lost it 20 years ago, not today. When there was a time that all of those programs could have been under Judo Canada umbrella, and it was not done. We are at that point of time, Judo was still called, Judo Canada was called Canadian Kodokan Black Belt Association, and anything that was not consistent with a very strict approach was anyway. Thank you, Anne, for bringing that up. That is definitely something that we need to think about from much more strategic perspective, I believe, because let me tell you this. 3 years ago, we negotiated with one of the top jiu-jitsu schools in Montreal to become part of Judo Canada Board of Directors. And we were told not to do it because this is a criminal organization. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge for our sport. But how we gonna tackle it? It's not something that I can actually reflect on or comment at this time.
Yeah, but please think about it, and maybe, to help our sport also.
Yeah. I will definitely reach out to Yuan to pick his brain more on this.
Well, Andre, I think we can end this webinar session. And thank everyone for attending this webinar. Thank you, Andre, for your very detailed information for this presentation. Thank you, everyone, for taking part of it. like Andre mentioned at the beginning, do not hesitate to contact Andre or myself if you have any further questions. And we will send to all of you in the coming this coming week the presentation and the link to the video. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice Sunday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Great seminar.